Hey everybody, we are live. Did you like that little countdown intro video? We're getting big time here with our production quality here on the show. It's pretty exciting. And not only that, we have Alison Hatheway tonight, who is actually a broadcast professional. So she's going to tell me all the different ways that I'm screwing up tonight, because we have somebody here that actually knows what they're doing. And it's an interesting part of her background. And so I can't wait to get to that. We've got folks jumping on here already to join us. So I would like to welcome you all and say, first of all, if you have any questions or comments, please drop those in the comments, and I will try to get to those as much as possible. And we would love to field your questions for Alison. Now, just briefly on background, she is running for a common pleas court judge in Hamilton County. And so we're super excited to have you tonight, Alison. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me, Derek. This is excellent. I love this.
Absolutely. And we're actually live now, not only on Facebook and on my personal Facebook page, which we shared around all the groups, and also my personal profile, campaign page, and Twitter and YouTube as well. And actually, we have maybe our mutual friend, Matt Bruning, already stopping by.
Hi, Matt.
From ODOT, he says he hasn't seen you since the WKKJ days.
There we go. It's been a while.
We'll get to that. Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining us, and we appreciate that. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere. But anyways, a super interesting background that you have. Now, you're originally from the Columbus area, is that correct? We like to, on the show, we like to get the backstory and hear where folks are coming from.
Yes. So I've lived in Cincinnati for just about 19 years now. But I am from a suburb of Columbus called Westerville, Ohio. Both of my parents were public school teachers. My mother was a special ed teacher in Columbus public schools, elementary school age children. And my dad was an art teacher at Westerville North High School, where coincidentally I went to high school while he taught there. So that was fun, going to school where your dad works. But he was also my high school basketball coach. I went to Muskingum College, which is now called Muskingum University in Eastern Ohio. I played women's basketball there. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in speech communication.
Real quick. So we're going to hear more about your broadcast career and then your legal career, and you're going to be you're going to be a judge here shortly. But before all of that, you were a star athlete as well. Is this true?
I mean, I was good. I don't know if I was a star, but I was pretty good. I played in college. We had a pretty successful team. I played for the late great Donna Newberry at Muskingum. She was a great coach. She also held a lot of records. I think NCAA records for her softball coaching career too. So I was really privileged to play for a really great coach.
Now, do you think let's touch on that for a second, because we talk about athletics and being involved in that, the discipline that instills and teamwork and those types of things. What's your sense of that, just in your background of not many people? I had a great career at the Y. And intramurals in college. That was the extent. Although I did have a nice little baby hook and a drop step and a little baby hook, and then
there you go.
Time to time. But just that sports background. Do you feel that had moving forward today, that had played a role in your development, if you will?
Absolutely. I think sports and team sports in particular are really great. I think I would encourage, not every kid is going to be a superstar athlete, but I would encourage any kid that I come in contact with to play a sport or get involved in a team activity, because you learn how to work with others, you learn how to take direction. Sometimes you learn how to step up and be in a leadership role. Sometimes you have to step back and know where you fit into the team and what you can do. I think, in addition, playing college sports, I played at a Division III school, but I'm telling you, we worked just as hard as those C1 kids, and we weren't on athletic scholarships. So, the amount of physical work that I've done in the past, I think it builds into your character. You kind of get a sense of like, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. And I think that is something that I've carried with me throughout every career I've had, everything I've done. It's something I still try to instill in my children today. So sports is something that really was a foundational part of who I am, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome, and words of wisdom there. So moving forward, and so you were planning on a broadcast career, right? And that's, you have your degrees in communications or something along those lines, and then you went on to a career in radio news. Is that right?
That I did, yes. I think I started out wanting to go into television, but the job I found out of college was in radio. At WKKJ in Chillicothe, Ohio. It was a small station, very small station. But it was a great place to start. I got to do a lot of sports broadcasting. I was able to do some color commentary for some high school basketball games when I was working there. I also got the opportunity to host a high school football Friday night wrap-up show. I started there, and then I ended up moving on to a bigger station, 610 WTVN in Columbus. And I was there for I can't remember how long I was there. I was there for a few years. I actually met my husband working there. So that's where we met. He was also in radio news. And we've been together ever since. So I think, it was around 1999, 2000. I know I'm showing my age. I probably shouldn't do that, but is when I was working there. And then I actually was at 610 WTVN, and the newsroom got a call from the news director down here at 700 WLW, the big one, asking for some help because there was riots and unrest that happened after 19-year-old Timothy Thomas, an unarmed Black teenager, was shot by a Cincinnati police officer here. I was chosen to come down and help, and little did I know at the time when I came down that I would one day live in this community and be a leader in the fight against injustice here in this city. So I did come down. I helped. I was here a couple days. I think they were happy to have me. But I went back up to Columbus. At that point, I'd been thinking about a career change into law. I'd made the decision to do it. And right about that time, it was a few months later, I got a call from the news director down here at 700 asking me if I wanted to come down here and work. He had an opening. And I said, well, I'm trying to move away from this career path and take a new direction. But I said, if you let me work for you and go to law school at the same time, I'll come down. And he agreed. And so I came down, worked full time at 700. I was there for about 5 years, went to law school at Chase part-time while I was working full time. My husband and I got married in that time. We started a family, had my daughter while I was still in law school. So I'm juggling a lot of different things at once.
You're already made a cameo in the behind. Is she doing some work done outside?
Yeah, she wanted to decorate the porch with the fall landscaping, and I said, why not? Yes, it's one less thing that I have to do. So knock yourself out. So she's going back and forth. I think she's having fun though. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And our friend from Madisonville, Bill Collins, stopped by and left a comment that said the Timothy Thomas case, was really the beginning of police reform here in Cincinnati. And of course, that was kind of the culmination of a number of shootings that had taken place that led to that. But it's kind of interesting that that's what brought you initially in a news reporting role to Cincinnati. But yet you have an interest in, kind of reformative justice, if you will. And then that's kind of been the focus of your, legal career. It's kind of ironic that that's what brought you here during those times.
Right. And, I really kind of just didn't think a lot about it until I decided to run. And I was like, kind of reflecting. And I was like, you know what? This stuff is really what brought me down here in the first place. And, when I think about like the career, my career path and, just my life path and what I've done over the years living in this community, I'm just like, wow, it is. It's pretty amazing, actually. Yeah.
So essentially you're going to school, and we know how challenging that is. I did it working in my police career, working on a master's degree. at the same time, but you're going to law school probably by night and working during the day and all of those things, and starting a family and all of this. But I always like to ask the folks that are running for that are attorneys that are now running for judge, especially those in, like, you've done a lot of work with the public defender's office, right? That's where you've been employed. You know, you can do a lot of things with a law degree. You can kind of take it and go like the big law route, you know, probably be a high-powered attorney and, you know, make the big bucks. Or you could be a public defender. And, you know, so what was your thinking around that? You really had a desire to try to really help folks?
Well, you know, when I first decided to go to law school, you know, I felt like I wanted to leave radio, and, you know, that type of work is so important and so necessary. I felt like I had a calling to be more hands-on in helping people. I didn't know at the time I'd be at the public defender's office, but, you know, once I got there, I was like, okay, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. You know, this job has been, you know, it's challenging at times. It's also extremely rewarding. But yeah, I started as a staff trial attorney at the public defender's office. You know, I started there in, I think, '07, so it's been over 13 years. I worked in municipal court. I've tried cases in felony common pleas court, and currently I lead the juvenile division at the public defender's office.
Would you say the working with the kids, is that where a passion lies for you, or what's the difference if we think about the public defender's office, adult versus a juvenile?
You know, I think the juvenile court is a little more rehabilitatively focused compared to the adult world. But, you know, I also think, you know, I'm running for common pleas court judge, which is not juvenile court. But there are a lot of things I think that we can do in the common pleas court. It's not going to be exactly the same as with the kids and with juvenile court, but there are things that we can focus on that are more rehabilitative, more restorative, which also is a benefit to victims of crime. Not only, you know, the rehabilitation part for defendants and those accused and convicted, but also restorative justice for victims. There's things that we can do that I think are a little more outside of the box, that are kind of the ideas that float around on the regular in juvenile court. I think we can bring some of those ideas to the adult court. It's not going to be exactly the same. You know, there's statutes and laws on the books that, you know, determine and dictate sentencing and things like that. But when appropriate, I think we can start looking at some alternatives, which I think is going to, I'll talk about this probably a little bit later, but do some things to reduce disparities and, you know, make our system more effective rather than just punitive.
Right. And that's what we've seen, I think, a lot of just kind of this notion of, you know, law and order, quote unquote, lock them up and throw away the key type of thing. Rather than trying to peel back some of those layers and get to some of this. Now, we've got a question from Chad Delaney, who I'm not sure if you can answer this because it might be a little bit outside the scope from a judicial role, might be more to somebody who's a lawmaker, but he's talking about cannabis legalization. But at the same time, we know, that that we've got folks in prison because of marijuana prohibition and the quote unquote war on drugs and all of the terrible outcomes that have come out of that. So when you talk about restorative justice or reformative justice, some of those types of things, is that the type of thing that we're talking about?
Well, as a judge, you do have to follow the law, and I can't really comment on, any type of a case that might come in before me just because of the judicial code of ethics that I'm bound by as a candidate. But I can say, we need to look at things like what's the cause of a lot of the criminal behavior? Is it substance abuse? Are there other things we can do? I know that currently the Common Pleas Court does have a drug court, but from my knowledge, I don't think that as many people get the opportunity to utilize that court as maybe they should. And I think that's something that not only I would like to see more access and equal access to those types of programs when it's appropriate. I think my other slate mates, which I'll probably talk a little bit more about later, also think that's of great importance.
Well, I'm about it because I mean, when we look at the folks that are, that are coming into court, I'm going to say, just based on my experience in my career, probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, there's some underlying issue, whether it was mental health, whether it's addiction issues, all of these other types of things. So when you see your property crimes and your thefts and your breaking and enterings and your burglaries, it's somebody, if I'm an opiate addict, right, I'm just trying to get my next fix. I will break a car window, if I see a quarter in the cup holder. And it's that type of thing. And so, if we're only just locking people up and not going at those root, kind of causes, I think from all angles, whether it be the courts and the criminal justice system and elected officials focused on these things, that, we're really not solving anything and just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it.
Right. And then you get a revolving door, where people continue to recidivate instead of like really getting at the underlying issues. And, I think that's what the goal of the juvenile court is. I don't see why that has to stop for adults. I understand adults are more developed than children, and they, have more, probably, more life experience than kids do. And they're more developmentally advanced than kids are. However, they suffer a lot of the same traumas, right, that kids do, or they have suffered a lot of the same traumas, which causes a lot of that behavior and the substance abuse and the addiction and things like that. So just because they're adults doesn't mean that they don't deserve to have those issues addressed. And if appropriate, to have access to that, no matter who they are or how much money they have or, the color of their skin or whatever. Everybody needs to have equal opportunity and equal access to justice.
Sure. Now, one of the things I sometimes hear kind of feedback as somebody who's a Democrat, progressive, but had, a long career in law enforcement, that the kind of the spin is from the other side, if you will, well, they're soft on crime. And they're just going to let everybody out, and it's a free for all, and all hell's breaking loose. So, I mean, do you draw the line someplace? I mean, if it's gun crime, I mean, there's just violent people out there, right, that have done really, really bad things. That doesn't mean that you get a traffic ticket, on a murder charge and sent on your way and told not to do that again. So how do you make that differentiation, and how do you do it to maybe kind of counter this notion or this spin from the other side that says, well, they're going to let everybody do whatever.
Right. And the things, I mean, I guess you can let's just look at bail, like monetary bail, for example. Like the purpose of bail is to ensure that somebody returns to court and that the community is protected, right? But obviously there's ample evidence out there that shows that the ability to pay money has no bearing on either of those things, right? You can have plenty of money and be a total danger to the community, but because you have money, you might get out. Or you could be no threat at all to the community, but you're poor and you have a lack of resource, or maybe even the reason why you went to court before was just because you didn't have transportation because you didn't or couldn't afford it at the time. So we really need to revisit that because, statistically speaking, in other jurisdictions where they've had bail reform, there's no indication that crime was on the rise. In fact, I think it was the opposite, that crime rates actually went down. When people get access to services pre-trial to make sure they can get back to court and that they show up and that, maybe we can get them in some rehabilitative type of help even before their case is resolved. So these are the kinds of things that I think we can do. Obviously, there are times where, the community needs to be protected and maybe a person doesn't get bail. But again, like because they can pay money or they can't pay money, that really shouldn't factor into why somebody is held pre-trial. It's because they're a threat or they are a significant flight risk. Another thing is, there's a lot of evidence around rehabilitation through restorative justice. And those programs, maybe not in every case it would be appropriate, but in some cases it's really worked wonders for not only rehabilitation of the offender, but restoring the victim and making them whole again. Because obviously, crime causes harm or criminal behavior causes harm, but restorative justice seeks to restore the victim. So it's not just, putting somebody in prison without addressing anything else doesn't necessarily really help anybody in every circumstance. So these are some of the things that I think could actually do more to protect our community, to serve our community, to make our community a better place for everybody to live in, and also probably reduce mass incarceration at the same time.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. But we're getting some great comments on here, and I appreciate everybody stopping by and dropping those. But maybe that ties into a couple of things I noted after I was on your website, and I don't want to say it wrong. It is hathawayforjudge.com, right?
That's it.
So everybody, please feel free to stop by Alison's website and check that out, hathawayforjudge.com. I think I dropped it in the Facebook comments. But a couple of things you mentioned on there, you were talking about, which we're kind of touching on, systemic change in the criminal justice system, and then also smart justice. Can you touch on that a little bit and tell me? That's actually a term that I haven't heard before. What?
That's because it's my turn.
I like it. You know,
I made that up.
I like it. It never feels that I learned something on every one of these programs. So when you're using those terms, what does that mean to you? What do we mean by that?
I think it's a lot of what I just kind of talked about. You know, I do believe that our system right now, as it stands, it's ineffective. Really, it's punitive. It's expensive. There's things that we can do to ensure justice for all, and we can do it smarter. We can do it more effectively, more efficiently. Bail reform is a big part of that, which I just talked about. Restorative justice is another thing that I think we should really consider when appropriate. Alternatives to incarceration when appropriate, and doing more to rehabilitate and reduce recidivism, get people in programming. Obviously, we talked about this a little bit too, is, you know, instead of just incarcerating people, we treat them when it comes to drug addiction and mental health. So, you know, there's a lot of things that I think we can do to make our system run better. I think as a result, we're going to have fewer disparities because people are going to have equal access to programming, and hopefully it will be administered equally and not just for some and not others. I think we're going to reduce recidivism. We're going to make our communities safer, and I think we're going to save money in the long run. I think we can make our system more transparent too. We can utilize data and data collection, which the court currently doesn't do, to really look at what's going on, to look at the disparities, because, you know, we all know they're there and we talk about them. You know, the federal numbers are there, but we don't even really know how bad the problem is here in Hamilton County because nobody keeps track. Nobody is collecting the data. Nobody's looking at it in a meaningful way, and there's no transparency. So I'm hoping that we can bring all of those things to our Common Pleas Court after November.
Exciting. And thank you for mentioning that. I've heard that a couple of times now, and I actually had not realized that there's no real statewide, correct me if I'm not saying this correctly, there's no, because I think this is a great point to emphasize, we're not tracking, tell me again exactly what we're not tracking. I don't want to say it wrong, but that data is available at the federal level, but at the state of Ohio, we don't even know if there's a disparity issue because we don't even have the data.
Right. You know, I think that federally they keep track of these things like sentences, and they look at, you know, racial disparities within sentencing. I believe the statistics are from the U.S. Sentencing Commission. You know, we have 13% of the population is, you know, Black and brown people, but 40% of the prison population are Black and brown people. That's definitely there's definitely disparities there, right? I think the number is, I think it's about 26% longer sentences that African or Black and brown people get compared to their similarly situated white counterpart, meaning same charge, same criminal, you know, history. So these are things that are readily available and you can look at under the, you know, the federal system. But here in Hamilton County, I think they're pushing toward a statewide system. I feel like maybe Cuyahoga County I know they keep better data than we do. I don't know how easily accessible it is, but they're not keeping track of these things here. And I think, you know, while those are the federal numbers, you know, if we really tracked it, who knows, it could be even worse here. Yeah.
So in Common Pleas Court, there's 88 counties in Ohio. Common Pleas handles felony cases. There's no central database that we can go look at and compare if one person's charged with felonious assault with a gun and another person's charged with felonious assault with a gun, and one's in Vinton County and one's in Hamilton County and one's someplace else, and one's black, one's white, and somebody else is Hispanic, or male and female, or any of this type of data. There's no place to go and compare. So we don't even know if I'm getting a 10-year sentence and somebody else getting a 25-year sentence.
Right. Not currently. And, and I think it's really good. Like you make a great point about looking at other jurisdictions and seeing what they're doing compared to what we're doing in Hamilton County. But I think also if that data is available, as a sitting judge, you can look at what you're doing and you can say, okay, wait a minute, I'm seeing trends here. Like, where are my biases and what can I do to address those biases? Because you may not even know that you have them until you're confronted with the data. So, and also the public will have access to that information and they can hold these judges accountable. I hope that they will hold judges accountable, even including myself when I'm elected, if I'm not living up to what I stand for or what I say I'm going to do.
Right. That's a great point. And really it's kind of shocking to me because when we talk about the criminal justice system, we often talk about police departments. And so around here, Cincinnati Police Department gets all of the attention. Yet we have all of these other departments that are doing whatever, who knows, and nobody's watching. By and large, mostly doing what they're supposed to do, I think, but we don't know if nobody's tracking the data, for sure. And then we have these other parts where, if we're tracking, traffic stops and looking at any kind of disparities that may or may not be there, everybody's focused on that. But nobody's even talking about, really, before this election cycle. Ginger Bach was on talking about the same thing the other night, that this data isn't being tracked from the court. So once it moves past the police into the court system, nobody's keeping an eye on that to see if somebody else is getting double the sentence of somebody else for the exact same time. We just don't even know. That's kind of crazy to me.
If I could have one other thing just about, and I think also having diversity on the bench where you have people who are judges who have different experiences and backgrounds, not only maybe like in race or ethnicity, but also in life experience, that they've been in places where, and had contact with people from all walks of life, and they're comfortable with people of all walks of life. They don't think of people from who are different than them as other. They understand that everybody's human, everybody should be treated equally. And I just feel like right now we also just don't have that. We have these judges that kind of come in this package and from a certain background, and it's probably very easy for them to look at people maybe who look like them and treat them differently than people who don't. So I think that's what we really need to work against. And I think the quickest way to get there is to elect new people who have a vast experience and vast diversity in background and experience.
Well, and that's a great point because, I've had Fanon Rucker on the show, and we have talked about this very point that prior to 2016, when AFTAB was elected in the clerk of court's office, you had this basic, almost, except for a handful of maybe municipal court judges and one or two others. For the last 100 years, the Hamilton County justice system, the courthouse, and all these associated offices were all led by Republicans. The prosecutor's office was basically a training ground where I can hire my nephew, my cousin, and the neighbor down the street, and my son's friend out of school, and everybody else. And that's a training ground because it's 225 some odd employees there. And then that's kind of like the minor leagues, going back to our sports reference. And that kind of feeds up into these, the various judgeships and everything else. And so it's like a group think. It's nepotism. It's everybody looks the same. There's only like 2 or 3 black employees in the Hamilton County's prosecutor's office, which is absolutely egregious. Right. And that's who all ends up working over at the courthouse. Everything from judges to magistrates to bailiffs to everybody on down the line. And so now we're finally starting to make some inroads there, but you can see when everybody comes from kind of that same background, maybe went to the same private schools, was always around the same folks, And the only time they see anybody that looks any different from them is when they're showing up in front of as a defendant. And so that's how you start to picture people, right, through that lens. So I think it's a very valid, that's my little rant on my soapbox over here. So I'm basically agreeing with you.
Right. No, and I think that you're right about, a lot of prosecutors, that's kind of the pathway to being a judge in Hamilton County. It's when you go from the prosecutor's office to sitting on the bench, and you come from that office. So, there's also another host of biases that probably come just from that, pathway to getting on the bench. Yeah.
Yep. So we've got my friend Joey Talmadge stopping by, which he is actually in New Zealand. This is the magic of the internet. And so he's made a couple of great comments here talking about the prison industrial complex. And, we've got for-profit prisons and all of that. And, speaking to the drug issue, it's like if it's natural and it grows in the ground, that's bad. But we'll sell you the opiates for billions of dollars, and everybody gets paid. And we keep people in that system because that's how we make money off of them, basically. Tori Lowry stopping by, and she says, do you want to be hands-on cases from the very beginning, or allow attorneys to try and work things out before you get too involved? Considering, and you have experience of this from as a defense attorney with the and now I'm drawing a blank, I'm getting older. The public defender's office. Right. Considering many of the hundreds of cases each year on a busy docket balanced by the need to manage cases. So how do you balance that between, you got a busy docket, your cases, and people tend to feel that way. I go into court, and I'm just like a cog in the machine. And all of it, and we're just, you're churning them through, run them in, run them out, next, take a number. But if you spend, if it's Perry Mason on every single case, the whole system locks up because it just can't work that way. How do you balance that?
Well, obviously there are a lot of cases that come through, but, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be afforded all their due process, because that's not their fault. If they have one case, I might have 100 cases I've got to get through in here, but that person's case is important to them and it deserves attention. So, obviously we'll do our best. I'm not in favor of the cattle calls in the morning. I think if attorneys can work things out behind the scenes before I get involved, I think that's great. As long as everybody's exercising due diligence and doing a good job and not just trying to force people into pleas or doing things like that. But yeah, I think that, no matter what I think of a case, people have constitutional rights. They have rights to a jury trial. They have a right to a fair trial, not just a trial, but a fair trial. They have a right to procedural and substantive due process, and everybody should be afforded that. And just because I'm tired or my docket's big doesn't mean that person doesn't get what should be afforded to them. So I know that's not like a easy answer fix thing. I think, we need to work harder. First of all, I think judges do need to work harder to make sure those protections are there for people, because that's their job.
No, that's good. And we were talking right before we came on about how fast time flies on these broadcast segments. As you know from your career as a broadcaster, we're already past a half hour into 35 minutes. So I want to touch on the campaign aspect a little bit. So this is your first time running for public office, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and it's a little bit weird with the judges because on the one hand, you are endorsed by a party. On the other hand, we know when people go in to vote because, we want our judges to be like, oh, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat judge, so, you get the different sentence based on that. So we don't put D or R on the ballot. So, because we have a fair and just judiciary. But from the campaign perspective, it's a little bit different. What's your experience been? It's super weird in these times of COVID, right? We've got to do more of this kind of stuff and less, out going to the fish fries on Friday night, stuff like that. Well, what's your experience been with that as a first time candidate?
Well, I guess the good news is I don't have anything to compare it to, right? Because I'm a first timer. But I do know when there's like these little, few and far between in-person events that happen, and I get a chance to go out and actually talk to people about why I'm running and why this is so important and why judges are so important. It really does. I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, this is great too. I thank you so much for having me on tonight, and the opportunity to do some things virtually, obviously in the interest of keeping everybody safe. But yeah, I think it would be a different ball game if we were out in the community a little bit more freely than we can under the current, pandemic restrictions. But it is what it is. We got to keep people safe. When we go out, we wear our masks, and we try to socially distance as much as we can. But it is nice to be able to talk to people face to face about how important this is.
Well, I tell you this, I've been out there at a number of different events and different things, going to lit drops and different things and helping the team out. And I've seen you there. So you're out there doing the work, and that's very important. One of the other kind of curveballs that the judges have is they can't actually ask for campaign donations. Yet you're supposed to raise money. Now, it's hard enough, based on my experience in 2017 of running for council. It's super fun to sit down on the phone for hours at a time calling people out for money. Like there's nothing I'd rather do, right? It's hard enough to do anyway. And then the judges are in this weird scenario where you have to raise money, but you can't make the ask. So I'm going to do that on your behalf right now. Everybody should go to Hathaway for Judge, HATHEWAY, hathawayforjudge.com, and drop a little contribution. Those yard signs do not buy themselves, and so that's very important to do that. You can also sign up there to volunteer, and of course there's a number of different events going on every weekend. I'm going to be out on the east side, was on the west side last 2 weekends, I think. I'm going to be on the east side, Hyde Park and Mount Washington and Mount Lookout, dropping lit this weekend. So are you going to be out? Are we going to see you? There's tons of events going on here and there.
Yes, I should be out. I'll probably be dropping lit. There is a forum. It actually, the Amos Project is doing a forum on Sunday at 4. I think it's going to be streamed virtually, but the candidates I think are going to be in person. So I've been invited to come there and participate in that. So I'll be there. I'm hoping to be at First Corinthian Church on Sunday morning if I can. Hopefully, directing traffic and helping them volunteer a little bit, and then also handing out a little lit at the same time. So yeah, I'll be out and about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But if I want to get a hold of you, tell me what your social media is so we can follow you and find you there. And if there's any other way that folks can help support you in these final 40 days or so, whatever it is.
Yeah, social media. It would be awesome if you guys could repost and post and share and retweet and all that good stuff. So I'm Alison Hatheway for Judge on Facebook, and as well as on Instagram, and at Alison Hathaway on Twitter. And then hathawayforjudge.com is my website.
There you go. That's perfect. Well, with that being said, please everyone share this video so more folks can get to know Alison, not only from the campaign perspective, but her great background as a star college athlete. A radio news personality in Columbus and Cincinnati, public defender, and now running for judge and soon to be on the bench. So that's a great resume, and certainly look forward to that. So thank you for joining us this evening, Alison, and everybody at Derek Bauman as usual. And we're going to be doing this now not only on Facebook but Twitter. YouTube. I'm still trying to get on LinkedIn Live. They're in beta. If anybody's got the hookup at LinkedIn, help a brother out so we can go live on LinkedIn as well. And we will be back actually Wednesday with a very special episode of the show. So I'm keeping you in suspense on that, but mark your calendars for Wednesday on all of these channels. You're not going to want to miss this one. So, Alison, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Absolutely. Take care, Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Be safe and have a great night.